That's the primitive brain because it's trying in the past, anything that was out of the norm, discomfort could kill you. But we've evolved into a place and a world where that's simply not the case. But our bodies, right? We haven't done enough to kind of help our bodies transition into that conscious place.
Hello and welcome to Holistic Circle Podcast Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philipp Kobald. We are reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy and have found a way to integrate it into their daily lives. I am happy to have here today with me Tibisay Hernandez from New York. Hello, Tibisay.
Hello, Phil. Nice to see
Did I
you.
pronounce it correctly? But I think I didn't get it 100%. That's what's the
Tibby is fine.
Tibi. Okay, thank you so very much. You had this super helpful, and this podcast is already on the way. I'd like to start with a small introduction so the viewers can see who you are, what's your background, before we get into more detailed questions. Maybe you can give us a small introduction.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, my name is Tibisay Hernandez. I am located in Albany, New York, and I am a leadership and diversity and equity and inclusion specialist and leadership training developer. So, I consider those two things kind of separate because I do create all of my curriculum. I do put all of the things together myself with a lot of research and a lot backed by a lot of evidence-based strategies. But my hope and goal is to be able to create curious spaces. So my company is called A Curious Space, and it's a place where people can go to ask the questions that feel like they can't ask in other arenas, or that they feel like, hey, if I don't know this, I might be demonized by my community, right? So creating space for people to be able to also answer those questions from a place of love and care and compassion and wanting for folks to understand each other from that place as well, from that place of empathy. So it's a little bit different than, creating these spaces is a little bit different than your traditional training space because I am asking people to be very vulnerable. I'm asking people to go into places of themselves that maybe they wouldn't traditionally go to in a regular training. And that requires a lot of building a lot of trust with myself as a facilitator and with leaders in the organization. But before that, I've been in all sectors. I've been in the not for profit sector. I started off in early childcare education. So, really started off with teaching and training the youth and young children, and that was definitely my passion, and then that transitioned into higher education, so I spent many years in higher education, and then transitioned into corporate spaces, doing adult trainings, and then finally into government spaces, but right now, I really am focusing on a curious space, but I've kind of been at all levels of education and seeing how people learn in all of these different spaces, and all of that informs how I develop my trainings and how I create spaces. So I'm excited to talk to you about how to create those spaces and how to give people grace and give people an opportunity to connect.
This, I think, is going to be a great podcast because of your wide background on education. Because part of spirituality is learning in one way or the other, learning about yourself, learning about this, learning about that. So there's like a whole learning theme embedded into spirituality. If you're not curious, you're definitely not going to grow as a spiritual person. I think if you're a little bit more serious about spirituality, you need to learn about learning. Uh, it is
Absolutely.
somehow a connection. No matter what is your spiritual path, learning is a key element. And I've come to the understanding that there are some factors within us who make us better in learning or more open to learning. And I guess that you will be a brilliant conversation partner to talk about these technical elements which makes the person learn, transform the stages. Maybe if you want a little bit jump in and tell us about stages, because I had a sneaky feeling It'll be quite similar to the stages of spiritual growth.
Absolutely. So, one of the biggest things that we know as children when we start to learn is that there is a deep discomfort that happens, right? There's a lot of trial and error that occurs when you're first starting to learn something. And that's actually the place where I begin a lot of my training. I will tell people, think about when you first started to learn how to read, how uncomfortable that was. You had to figure out the sounds of these letters and putting them together and bridging this gap of knowledge. It's the same thing when we're thinking about connection with other human beings that we are different from us. And when we have different backgrounds, it can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like, where are we able to find this connective tissue between us? Right. So I like to bring my participants in any training back to those early days of learning, because the first thing that we start losing as we get into adulthood is that resilience for being uncomfortable. And the learning process is one that is uncomfortable, but it's so important that we understand that in that discomfort, when we feel that, that means that we're on the precipice of growth. That means that we are on the precipice of expanding into a different version of ourselves than we knew. So we shouldn't shy away from being uncomfortable. We should really lean into it, because that is where we gain all of these new tools and all of these new strategies to navigate the world. I mean, I think it's important that we recognize.
I kind of need to stop you here because this is super interesting what you say. Then, in the spiritual teachings, I don't know, I teach meditation for more than 30 years, and there's a strange phenomenon that none of us maybe really understand. It's, for example, if you're doing meditation and you're sitting there and for a couple of minutes, and then you get a back pain or your thoughts start to wander, all of these things. It, the fun thing is, as a beginner, you go into it or you remove or whatever. But when you're more experienced, you know that it's just your body trying to stop you from doing meditation. It's like your brain is your enemy. It don't want you to grow. It don't want to develop. So, but if you know that and you
Yes.
just keep sitting, the pain just disappears. It's just an imagination, and then you can sit for hours and don't feel anything. I'm so curious now what you've said because you're going from a different corner. Do you have any clue or any idea why my brain don't want me to grow? Why my brain don't want me to get enlightened? Why my brain is doing crazy things, getting headache or pain, whatever, just to stop doing what is good for me?
I think it's about our brains being conditioned not just to society, but being able to survive. So our primitive brain, right? It processes discomfort as something bad is going to happen. So myself, I have to protect my body. Whatever it is that you're doing in this moment feels uncomfortable, feels unfamiliar. So I want you to stop doing that, because I think that the next space that it's going to go into is going to be something that's negative, is going to be something that's bad for me. So until we train ourselves to be connected in that mind, body, spirit of understanding that there is no big bad that's going to come out of what I am intentionally doing, right? Because our brains have evolved from that primitive place of self protection to a place now of understanding and processing information in different ways, right? So instead of that primal going into that frontal cortex brain of processing information, so getting from that, oh my goodness, something is different, which means I need to fight, flee, freeze. That's the primitive brain, because it's trying in the past, anything that was out of the norm, discomfort could kill you. But we've evolved into a place and a world where that's simply not the case. But our bodies, right? We haven't done enough to kind of help our bodies transition into that conscious place. And we don't give ourselves enough room in our society today to be still and to make those mind, body, spirit connections. And I think that that's why the mindfulness and the spirituality process has always been a part of the human experience, is because we subconsciously know that being still and connecting these different parts, which we've characterized with language as different, because I don't see them as different, but our essence of ourselves really only materializes when we can be still and we can listen to our bodies and figure out what is triggering discomfort to us in our known environments. I think that that's really
It's
important.
super. I just had yesterday a podcast with a trauma specialist who's also doing a lot of spiritual work, but also is a trained trauma specialist. And the same conversation from a different angle, also talking about why, when we're into trauma or locked into our bad behavior, that we constantly choose the wrong thing. We choose the wrong food. We choose like drinking alcohol, whatever. We just constantly feed the negatives. And if we don't stop and start to look inside, which is a hard process, again, the body don't like it, then we start to see clearer, we make good choices and healthy choices, and we overcome. So it's fascinating to talk now today with a education specialist, looking at the same issue from a slightly different vantage point. But so there is a overcome. Uh, Maybe one more time, I need to ask you to repeat, what are for you the elements, especially with smaller kids when you worked with, to overcome? Because I can see with my daughter, she don't want to learn something, they get nervous, they get angry. You know, there's always the moment where it's not coming easy. You have to take an effort, and then you always see the same behavior with the kids. They throw stuff, and you know all of that better than me. So
Yes.
just tell us one more
Yes.
time, because I think this is super important for spiritual growth, how to overcome. Let's start with kids and then let's take it from there. Overcome these
Yeah.
blockages.
So comfort when you're a child equates to safety, right? So when children are experiencing discomfort, the best thing that you can do with them is teach them how to pause, how to take breaks, how to breathe, but also how to sit with a trusting person because they need another person to kind of transfer that negative energy into that can help them process their own emotions and what they're feeling because they might not be as experienced as the teacher, the educator, the caregiver in the space as to why it is that they're experiencing that discomfort. But that teacher, that caregiver, they understand. They're like, okay, this is hard for you because this is new. So, how do we overcome this difficulty is I need to make you feel safe and I need to make you feel like you can do it and that repetition of that skill is going to lead to understanding, right? So that's what we don't give ourselves is a place to fail and then to try again with a trusted individual that is encouraging us when we get to a place where it gets too uncomfortable. So like when the kid is throwing the things, when they're really frustrated, that's your body saying, you're not breathing enough, you're not being still enough, you're not calming down your central nervous system. Nothing is attacking you. The discomfort of not knowing, it feels like an attack. It feels like someone's attacking you. And that's why your body is dysregulated. It's going into a dysregulated state because you literally feel like learning this new knowledge is an attack.
This is super important stuff because I think I've really had a lot of spiritual conversations in my life, but this is super interesting to talk to an educator because you're coming from a very specific angle and you have tons of knowledge as an educator. We experience, I mean, maybe it's not the wording that I would use or that other spiritual teachers would use, but everybody listening now understands precisely in a spiritual path, we have exactly these issues. And this was his very interesting things, what you said, that are discomfort, safety, that are super interesting elements, especially I'm as a teacher, a group leader. Of course, I supposed to give that comfort. I supposed to be that same space and so on and so forth. And this, I think, is a very valuable. And sorry, I'm changing the subject for a second. Listening to you, I'm not ever talk about politics in the podcast. This is not the subject. But just thinking that a leader or a good person should make you feel comfortable, safe, then you can grow as a person, as a nation. You can develop. This is the first time I hear that now in this very specific way you put the wording. If we want to develop as a society, as people, we need to feel safe.
Yes. Yes, 100%. And again, remember the big part of it is that there are reasons why spiritual leaders become spiritual leaders, right? Because they can lead. And with that, there's a responsibility of being a conduit of that discomfort, of that uncomfortable energy that someone is giving to you. A good educator can sit with someone that's experiencing that and help to kind of cipher off some of that discomfort. Because in that trust process, what happens is you don't feel alone and you feel more equipped to get through it because you're not alone. And that's ultimately the human experience and why we're always trying to find connection is because we are trying to find individuals that can help us navigate and carry those moments in our lives that feel so uncomfortable, that feel so out of the norm, that feel like the world is attacking us. It's through that connection. And those leaders, those spiritual leaders have to be very strong. Their development and their understanding of self and self awareness has to be very, very strong. A good educator in front of the classroom is someone that can feel all of the children that are in front of them and is able to pivot in ways that allow for those that are stronger educationally to still follow, but allow for those that are feeling that discomfort to be able to feel like they can raise their hand and say, I don't know what's going on. I'm feeling lost. So, trust is such an important piece of this because as the leaders, as the educators, we have to engender in those that might be a little bit more ahead that we have the knowledge to get them to another level of development. But for those who might not be there yet, we also have to give them the support and the feeling that if they are in a place that they can't see their way out of what's happening, that they can say, I'm lost. And I think that spiritual teachings have an abundance of that. And I think that that's why human beings started documenting from a spiritual perspective. Like when we think of hieroglyphics, when we think of archaeology, when we think of all of the writings and teachings that we find, it's coming from this place of wanting to understand and wanting to educate and wanting to give a roadmap to those that come after us, right? So the spiritual realm is really the foundation for everything educationally because it's that essence of humanity that really drove human beings to document their teachings. And that documentation is what sets us apart from all other
Right.
species
Well,
in the world.
let's. I'm sorry, making a rough break, but it's very interesting what you say. I need to use your time wisely. And you said that you're working with companies, most probably managers or leaders or things like that. And there is somehow something that I'm interested now to hear your opinion because I've been a lot also in leadership training long time ago. I'm old man now, but when I was much younger, And there is a certain leadership which is based on this is a pyramid structure, whatever. But it's like leader a little bit in terms of manipulation, getting your way, looking people's character, knowing trigger points, and yeah, you can make the wheels turn and you get your way. And I'm listening to you and I'm thinking that you're promoting a different form of leadership. Now I need to be very brutal and ask you, I think I know which kind of leadership you will explain to us, but give me arguments why that's also the right economic choice for a company to be the leader that I think you will now present to us, that this also makes economic sense. I would love to hear that.
So, servant leadership is, for me, the type of leadership that I try to promote. Being in service of the human beings that you are, leading within the organization, leading within the company. What the pandemic showed us is that individuals need human connection and that organizations need human connection. What we're seeing now and what we're experiencing now is the best business case for servant leadership. We are seeing individuals going back into the workplace without leaders understanding that maybe the flexibility that we needed to have during the pandemic, the care that we gave people, the tools, the extras that we did in order to keep the wheels turning are not things that we should roll back now. They are things that we should enhance because people are walking away from companies that are not serving their humanity. They're saying, you know what? I don't have to do it this way. I can go to this other company that has the right benefits, that understand that I'm a parent, that I'm a caregiver to an elderly family member, and that's going to give me the flexibility to do the role. So we created this system of work that really was an assembly line type of a system. We made human beings cogs in a machine. And we tried to convince everybody that you could be divorced from your emotions, that you could be divorced from your humanity when you're at work. And that what the pandemic showed us explicitly is that that is not the case. What our mental health crisis globally is showing us is that that is not the case. What the burnout rate is showing us is that they want their humanity validated within the systems that they work. But you're right. I think that leaders do exploit that, right? So we saw a transition in a lot of organizations to open spaces and having food and drinks and everything that you need in the workplace. And it kind of became like a casino, right? Like no clocks, like you don't know how much time you've been here. You're just going and going, right? It became that kind of enticing, like, oh, you can come and work at this organization and it's going to be so fun because you never have to leave. We're going to give you bean bags and we're going to give you nap pods. And there was this manipulation of trying to turn the workplace into where you live, work, play, so that you can basically exploit yes, that family analogy, right? And but it's exploitative. You're exploiting somebody's need to be able to disconnect and to be able to rest and to be able to stop and meditate and not give their entire soul and life to a company or an organization. So, why does it make business sense? It makes business sense because people are waking up to the fact that those people who are getting rich off of your discomfort, right? It's not working for the vast majority of us. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this, resistance to this thought process that an organization, in order to get to their bottom line, has to be exploitative, right? Has to use these hierarchy mindsets that hurt individuals you're seeing that people are not loyal to companies in the ways that they were before because companies are not loyal to people in the ways that they were before.
So, but basically, if I translate, would you say it makes economic sense because the current system is just not sustainable? That's
No.
more or less how I understand you. Either companies involve and make a more, again, humane or more humane work environment. This level of exploitation is just not sustainable. Do I translate you correctly?
Yes, absolutely. And people,
So,
you're seeing this like,
or
yeah, go ahead.
how would you place this now in exactly what you said? Now I'm putting artificial intelligence as a neighbor in your like workforce. That is your chair, and that the next chair is artificial intelligence. So now, what would you think as a company owner, and what would you say uh, to that argument?
You have to use AI as a tool because that's what it is. It's a tool, but it's not a replacement of people. It's not a replacement of creativity. It's still something that a human being has to feed information into to get a product and outcome out of. So we can't dismiss AI as a valuable tool, but we have to put policies and procedures in place, just like any new technology, any new innovation that's happened in our world. We've always thought that it's going to be the big bad or the thing that's going to replace everyone or stop things from happening. And it never is because ultimately human beings are the creators of these systems. Therefore, they are the leaders of these systems, and human beings are going to continue to be needed in order for these systems to develop and grow and change. So I say, don't be afraid of AI, but leaders need to make AI humane. So there have to be some policies and limits that are put in place in order for AI to not go so far that it starts hurting and eliminating people's opportunities, access, and ability to engage and be a productive part of our global economy. So if we rely on I think it'll be at our own detriment 100%. But I think that AI is just like a computer was. I think that when we first saw computers and the internet develop, everybody was like, oh my God, this is the end. These computers is going to be the end of all of these different jobs. And we did see things change, right? So we went from, well, not in all governments, because let me tell you that people are still doing things by hand and there are still graphic people that are not using Excel spreadsheets, right? But when Excel spreadsheets first came out, like that was the big thing. Like, well, accounting is gone, it's dead because now we have all these software that can do all of it. Like, no, no, it just became another tool and another accessory. And as human beings learn how to use these tools, new innovative jobs are going to be created. There's going to be new areas that are going to be developed where human beings are going to be able to take the reins in new and creative ways. So I think that as we develop tools, what we should know from history and from understanding our development as humanity is that as tools are created, it's not that they ever replace us. They give us new avenues and new arenas that we develop and that we need to take the reins of and that we start working with. But policies are going to be
Right.
integral in that
I mean, we're not
process.
having a podcast about artificial intelligence, but I'm not doing it because for me, the key question is that I see what you're doing, and my bottom line is to finish like the first half or more than half of this podcast. But what you do is, or what you say is, all of it will be well, and everything could be managed if we get more conscious, more open leaders, more leaders that give us safety and are considerate and not exploiting us. So basically, all could be well if we choose wisely or train the leaders wisely, train the kids wisely, because if you have creative workforce or a good kept workforce, that they can use these new tools to create new creativity and new ideas and so on. I'm with you theoretically. I'm a little bit more skeptical than you are, but it's just another podcast. But the thing is, the leaders that we need there, I am 100%
Yes.
with you, to raise consciousness, to raise awareness. And basically, it's a human thing. When we got atomic bombs, we had to train with the bombs not to use it. Now we have genetic
Exactly.
research and we should grow, not to use it. So growth is important. That brings us to the next subject or question, if you would like to. We spoke about that. I'm very interested in how you can now give the next generation, our children, how you can open it up to spirituality, how you can lay the groundwork, put the seeds inside. And, I've did already like 2, 3 podcasts, always coming back to the subject because it's really fascinating for me. What can we do right as teachers, as parents, as whoever, if we have young children in front of us in the day of TikTok and whatnot? What can we do? What should we do to make the groundwork for growth, spiritual growth, and spirituality in the next generation?
I think it's important for us to give children spaces where they can practice compassion, empathy, care. I think, a lot of religious practices, what me growing up, I grew up as a Christian. And one of the biggest things that that religious practice taught me was that giving back was an important, important piece. You shouldn't be so self centered. You should be community based. You should think about how you are a part of a larger global community, how your energy and your light and being a positive light gives others permission to be a positive light as well. So enter into spaces being a positive light. I'll tell you that one of the most impactful things that as a young person, I'm from New York and I went to North Carolina and we did a mission trip where we were helping young children during Easter. It was in a rural community. It was a very immigrant community. And there was a large Christian population there. And we were going to give donations to play games with the students. And this was all during our break. I was in high school. And seeing how other people lived that was so different from how I lived. I lived in an apartment in a big city. These were people that were living in RVs, in rural places, with a lot less than what I was growing up with. And the joy that I saw in those children and just the optimism that I saw in those families, even if they didn't have all the bells and whistles of the things that I had, there was joy. I didn't really understand that until I saw a very sick child and she had a terminal illness. She was running around. She was the most joyful one out of all of them. She was visibly ill and sick, but her spirit, it wasn't any material thing that was fueling her spirit. It was her will, her wants, and the love of the community that was around her that cared for her. So I think that we need to start connecting children to experiences like that even more. So, more community service, more getting outside of your own community and traveling to other communities, immersion into culturally different spaces is so valuable and so key. Don't stay in your own bubble, don't stay in your own neighborhood, you know? And don't go at things from a place of pity either, like if we're going to a soup kitchen and we're volunteering and we're doing all of these things, it's not so that you pity people. It's so that you're in community with people that are having different life circumstances than you, and you're learning from them and you're growing from that. So I think that we need to go back to being servants of each other and being servants to each other. And parents really have the opportunity to take the reins in that arena. But I think that our educational system can do more to present more opportunities, not just to do field trips for children, but to do trips of service for children and teaching them at a young age to serve others, I think is really the way to go.
Wow. I think a lot of us falling in the trap of fear all over in so many ways, and they become so good putting fear in us, all levels. And it's the strongest speech I heard in a long time that we have to stay positive. We have to not let the fear inside of us, even the smartest, can be tricked with all the trapped that are around us. That we have to, that joy that you talked about. If we let it take away from us, if we let it that people can take this away from us, it's a true crime that we're committing as spirit leaders, as whatever we call ourselves. We must stay more focused. We must stay more determined. Don't let anybody take the joy away from us. Wow, what a very important lesson, especially Christmas time is coming. This is a number one life lesson that you just gave all of us. Thank you so much for these words. We are coming slowly towards the end. Can you maybe go back to the beginning and one more time now with we hearing the different ears tell you about the space that you wanna create, the space that you wanna found. Maybe if we listen to it again, we'll listen to it differently of why and what you're trying to create.
Absolutely. So my company, A Curious Space, is really trying to create opportunities for people to connect from a place of joy and light, but also connecting to each other from a place of understanding that we're all going to experience discomfort. We're all going to experience pain as human beings. And that alone connects us. That alone connects us. But if we can have conversations that transcend from us focusing on how our pain is different, how our joy is different, all of these different things. If we can have more conversations that allow us to be vulnerable, to be ourselves, to ask questions that we wouldn't normally ask, but that are inside of us, right? If we allow ourselves to really be curious and allow people to give us and provide us with answers from their varying perspectives, we create a more holistic view of the world. And that allows us to be better conduits of light. That allows us to be better conduits of joy. That allows us to sit with someone who might be in pain and not be consumed by that pain, but help them carry that pain and help them in their journey. We have to trust each other more and we have to understand that, you know, fear makes false expectations and false experiences appear real. That's what fear is, right? Is false things that are appearing real. It's our primitive brain telling us that there's a big monster that's coming to attack us. But ultimately, if everything is a monster and everyone is a monster, then we're left with nothing.
I, this is a an unbelievably important thing that you do. I've learned so much today in this conversation because I cannot help but listen to you and look at the world. It's just impossible for me these days to listen to you and not to look at the state of the world and how good they become with fear, and obviously how bad we become with joy. Would you like to say something to that without mentioning specifics?
Well, I'll say that what they don't expect is for us to come together. So I think that we all need to do the unexpected and to listen to the individuals that we think we are most polarized against they're not going to expect for us to want to listen to each other. So I think that that's what we need to do in the face of fear is do the unexpected and actually reach out to individuals that are not like us, that maybe didn't have the same values, didn't vote the same way politically that we would have voted, all of those things. We need to connect more instead of say, well, you did this, therefore you do not see my humanity and I can't have you in my circle. If we do opposite and we lean into the discomfort of being around individuals who did not make the same choices as us, I think that we will find that we can uncover the fear together and we can make sense of some of that fear and some of those tactics. And we can look for leaders who are seeking for us to come together in a real way. And we can shift our understanding of our world by having these conversations.
Yes. Yes. It's you say everything that needs to be said. First of all, I've encouraged every business leader, everybody out there. This is what you teach in your space. Maybe you cannot put it right now and today on a spreadsheet, but with less resources in the world, a more complex shift of power with the artificial intelligence and so on and so forth, you need to have a lot more tools. You cannot use the system of the 20th century to solve the problems that we are going to face. And especially if we look about young leaders or the young management, if you use the patterns, just put everything on the table, sign the contract no matter what. Who cares? There's always more land. There's always more oil. Guess what? No. You can drill now as much as you like. Go one more round. There's always one more round, but it doesn't make the problems go away. Even if you close your eyes and close your ears and play the monkey, but you know, you have to take the hands down and open your eyes at some point. And the world is exactly the way it is. There is no wishful thinking or magic wand. And the things that you teach for leaders is to be calm, to look at the reality and make choices based on real and not some fairyland. And what can be more important? And it's part of a spiritual journey. Very interesting. We did not talk that much about spirituality in a spiritual podcast, but I think it was one of the most valuable spiritual conversations I had in quite a while. So I'm so thankful to you. If you wish, you can say the last famous words. And thank you so much.
I'll say to leaders that if you care about your employees as human beings, they will care about your customers as human beings. And that transference of light will happen. That transference of joy will happen. And people will be more attracted to your organization because they will see you as individuals who care about humanity. And I think that we're all searching right now for leaders who care about our humanity. There's no better way that you can show that than by listening, by being open, by being a vulnerable vessel, and by putting limits to the harm. Harm reduction is so important in all of our spaces. We need to be open to reducing our harm and reducing the pain that we produce in our world. It's not going to completely go away. But if we're consciously trying to do that in every decision that we make as leaders, then we're going to be in a good spot.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.